keep finding ways that we're helping partners finding either, balance in their life or focus or purpose.
Practices that are going to help improve your project management skills or your finances.
We're here to talk about setting long-term goals and then how to achieve them.
Increasing your quality, therefore becoming the best place in town to work. Welcome to Academy Live.
Welcome to Academy Live. On today's show, we are going to take you on a coaching journey. We'll take a close look at what a coaching journey entails through the eyes of lead executive coach Todd Schorle. Professional business coaches have the ability to unlock potential and transform companies both personally and professionally. Business coaches provide you with personalized guidance and hold you accountable to your goals. They will give you the secret sauce to success, help you develop those repeatable processes, improve efficiencies, and boost profitability. We are so excited to hear Todd share his experience with both coaching and being coached with us. Before we get all into that, let's start off with our quote of the day.
Hey, Bessie, that was great. That was pretty spicy, Bessie. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Moving on. So, the quote of the day.
I kind of like the secret sauce. I really like the secret sauce, though. In our coaching, we talk a lot about Newton's third law: for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that's why I also have the Pax8 ready to go here. So.
Secret ingredient, secret sauce. Okay, let's get back to the quote of the day. So we're starting off today with a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. Right? Another thing that I hear Rex say a lot that I love is it's not where you end, it's that you start where you're at. I butchered it.
Not,
you're gonna have to
it's not where you are when you start. It's that you start where you are.
Yeah. And that journey, here's 1,000 steps, but you have to start with a single step to get the momentum, get moving. So that's really kind of what we're talking about today. And that's what we thought was pretty relevant.
I think we really like that quote because, a coaching journey, it is this monstrous thing, right? There's 100 different solutions you need to work on to improve the way you do business. And each one of them, there's those 5 phases that we talked about, right? Understand the best practice, document your way, train your team, implement the new process, and inspect what you expect. And the owners that we work with always want kind of the coaching process just to be over. Like, hey, we're going to do this for a couple of months and we're good, right? It's like, no. This is a couple year journey, but the important thing is that we get started and we start taking those individual steps. So
it is very much a journey, and I love that as part of it. And we don't always think that, what to expect on that. But, how many people get kind of stuck? Well, which way should I go? I don't know. Do I have everything? And just that first step, it's amazing how much that just starts that whole journey and the momentum you get by taking the steps. And I'm excited to hear about, Todd's experience all the way across, kind of coming from, the MSP side into coaching. Rex, do you kind of want to introduce Todd and bring him on?
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but Todd, I met Todd in 2011. He was in a session I did at ConnectWise's IT Nation about your operational journey. And, there was probably 20 or 30 people in the room, and Todd was one of them. And it was interesting because I ran the session again the next day, and it was like standing room only. And Todd got a hold of his service manager, says, I don't know what you're doing during this time slot, but you got to go to this session. And that's how I met Todd, and he was an early client. So I'm really excited to bring Todd on the show to talk about his journey.
Yeah, Todd, I'd like to kind of know what was your first step?
Step in the operational journey?
Yeah.
My first step in the operational journey was, it probably started years before I met Rex, realizing that I had a process problem and realizing that I had an issue in my business and wanting to try and fix that. So little by little, we started addressing processes. And one of the things that I like so much about that early session was that stepping into it, he started showing videos and documents and information as he talked about this operational journey. I'm thinking, this guy has what I've been trying to build. It's great. It's perfect. I need more of this. And it was powerful.
The answers.
The answers are all there. Somebody knows them.
That had to be appealing. I mean, like I said, it's just kind of what did you recognize as a problem? Like you said, you went into this and you had these challenges. What were some of the challenges you recognized that you were trying to address?
Well, the biggest one that brought me to that session that day was the fact that I was trying to address an issue around engineer compensation. I had maybe started down the operational journey of figuring out my process and procedure, but I hadn't done a good job figuring out how to compensate people underneath the managed services model. And the session talked about the four levers a little bit, and it talked about the engineer compensation plan, and light bulbs and sirens were just going off of like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This is what's needed. This is the part of the secret sauce that's missing, was that we needed to figure out how engineers could be compensated properly for doing work.
Good.
Yeah, the engineer comp plan I think is a big part of my personal success. But Todd, can you tell us just do a little bit of humble brag? Tell us about yourself. What got you here?
Sure. I started my business as a sophomore in high school. I was really writing a business plan around becoming a dial-up internet service provider, and nobody wanted to loan me money. Don't know why. So I pivoted to being a company that set up internet for other companies, and very quickly fell in line with doing small business server deployments, ran the course of Y2K, and realized, gosh, I'm going to run out of work here pretty soon. I'm running out of servers to replace. So I sort of jumped into the managed services space very early in my career, and built an MSP, ran it for 23 years, and eventually sold it, and joined C-level as I sold my MSP.
Can you talk a little bit about your journey as an owner? Like, so you started this because no one would just give you wads of cash to do an ISP. Like I said, I don't know why, but so that happened. But what was that journey when you went into that and you started that up to the point you sold? Can you kind of give us a highlight of some of the key moments in that journey?
Oh, well, there was many. I mean, I think that the first key moment was probably when I hired that first employee, and another one might be when I brought on my first office space. I had a memory of signing a check for an office space that I didn't realize I couldn't afford until 48 hours after I had signed the lease, and begging to get that back. I mean, there was lots of challenges through it. Remember very clearly some of those lessons learned. That 1,000-step journey isn't just 1,000-step journey. It's many 1,000-step journeys that you take along the way, I think.
It's definitely not a straight line.
No, it's not. It was all over the place in many cases.
I love that.
What I'm realizing though is, my journey was probably, I thought it was unique at the time. But as I became a coach, I've realized that many of the people that we work with have very similar stories, as they're sharing to us as they coach through what their challenges are. They are also struggling with some of those same challenges that I encountered.
We talked earlier in a previous show about the EMyth, right? The entrepreneurial myth. The myth is that entrepreneurs start businesses. The reality is the technicians in us do it. Start the business. Do you align yourself as an entrepreneur or a technician who had an entrepreneurial seizure?
I absolutely was a technician who had an entrepreneurial seizure. For me, it was all about wanting to get my first car, and it was about money. So I figured out I could make more money doing IT work than working in a snack bar, and very quickly started that business and went through that process of trying to figure out how do I scale up other people to help make more money, not just off the efforts of my own labor, but also learning to be the entrepreneur, learning to think differently than just as someone who is billing for my time.
So what was the first car?
Todd?
Yeah, thank you, Bessie. I'm glad I wasn't able to touch it. I knew I could count on you, Bessie.
It was a Ford Probe. It was I liked this 1996 Ford Probe, and I wanted a car. And it wasn't anything fancy, but it was what I wanted, and I worked hard for it, and eventually achieved it.
That's awesome.
There's always
Starting an
reasons why we do
MSP
things.
business, you too can have a Ford Probe.
Well, at 16, I had reasonable expectations. Later on, I told my wife, when we got married, I wanted little Cessna and little Piper, and went down this path of, okay, well, if I build a business and I keep building this business, I can definitely fly more. And so I think that the business was a vehicle for producing income, and that's part of the entrepreneurial seizure, was this idea that if I can work hard, I can produce income off my own back. But if I can learn how to empower other people and help other people become better engineers or better technicians or better at their role in their business through technology, I can have a much bigger impact.
So then,
Did you get the plane?
how did you become a coach? So you go through this yourself. So then, what was that next step for you?
So I heard two questions there. Rex asked, did I get the plane? No, I didn't get the plane. We ended up with kids and stuff. But I did get the pilot's license, and I developed an expensive flying habit there for a while as I learned what I like to do. And what I've actually realized about myself is, more than any one hobby, what I've enjoyed is I collect hobbies. I like to learn something, do it deeply, learn a lot of technical skill or proficiency about it, and then I get bored and I want to do something else. And so flying was fun. I did it for a while, and then I moved on. And I'm sorry, Chris, your question.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious.
Kind of
How
question
did
there.
you become? Yeah, how did you become a coach?
Oh,
What was
yeah,
that part?
that's an easy one. So I had a very complex, long interview process where first Rex said, "When can you start?" And then said, I'd be a great coach, and let me know if I'm interested at some point." And then in taking several calls with the team, they tried to talk me out of being a coach, which I think is awesome. Like, they really tried to dissuade me from it to make sure that I was committed to it. And I started coaching at the end of the run of my MSP. I sold my MSP in 2019, in January 1st, but I started the transition process really around June of 2018. So just about 5 years ago, I started shadowing calls as a coach in training. And I sort of made that leap from being a client to being a coach.
Yeah, I think a little later we're going to talk about kind of how that how transpired. I'm curious what it was like as an MSP owner to sort of begin that coaching, being a client of coaching.
Well, you were actually my second paid engagement with a coach. My first paid engagement kind of taught me what to expect a little bit. And the first coach I had was more on the sales side, because I was a little bit more uncomfortable in the selling. In fact, I'm not going to give away too much here, because I'm leading a presentation at Beyond where I'll be telling this story. So come to Beyond if you want to hear the rest. You got to come hear the story. But that's going to be called One Hand Up, One Hand Down, a template to your operational, or template to your leadership journey. So,
Okay.
but the story here is, my first coach taught me what to expect. It was expensive. It had to be expensive, and it had to be me showing up for it, because if it was easy enough for me to just cancel a session, I wasn't going to learn what he needed to teach me. And he was a sales coach, so he was very good at selling me coaching. And that lasted 2 or 3 years as I went through that coaching experience. And then I took a break for a little bit as I kind of digested those lessons and saw some growth in my business. And then what started to happen is this challenge around how do we pay our engineers fairly for the work using the comp plan, and all the challenge around, hey, those processes that I wrote a couple of years ago weren't scaling as the business was growing. We had some challenges, and it got us to where we were, but we needed to make that next leap. That brought me to you.
And how did
Right?
you
We're
know
getting back
you
to that story.
wanted to be? Yeah, no, I heard that story earlier today because I saw you practice for Beyond, and I'm really excited for all those stories that you're going to share. I think you're such a great storyteller, and I'm really excited for both of your sessions. I was curious about how you decided to make this transition from owning your business and being a mentor and a leader to others, to wanting to do that on maybe a very different platform of being a coach. How did you make that decision? How did you decide to be so committed to that idea?
Yeah. It was a process. There were some things I was unhappy about in my business that I was running into repetitive challenges with that I just wasn't able to get over. The largest of being the problem was me. I was the problem. I had some micromanagement tendencies and I had some leadership challenges that I hadn't yet grown past. And what I realized is that I was feeling a lot of stress from the business. The first thing that happened was I saw the opportunity to take a sabbatical. I've been running the business for 18 or so years, and I attended a conference, and someone spoke about how they thought their employees should have sabbaticals at 20 years. I thought, this is a great idea. Somebody works for 20 years, they should take a break and kind of hit reset and figure it out. And so what I started to plan 2 or more years before that sabbatical while coaching with Rex and Ken. And in the planning of it, it was really this realization that I had to figure out how to offload everything that was on my shoulders effectively enough to be able to not be in country for a long period of time. And so the coaching journey up to that point had been me coaching with Rex, mostly on owner and leadership things, and my service manager coaching with Ken on service management things. And then little by little, me transitioning out of that role as I went into this sabbatical. And so it started with me saying where to go. And about 2 months before I was about to go, my bookkeeper quit. And Rex encouraged me. He's like, no, you got to go. This is going to be really good for you. You got to go. And he didn't tell me why I had to go.
I was like, no, you have to go. There's never going to be a good time, right? You just have to commit to it and go. And things will shake itself out, right? And so.
And so my bookkeeper quit about 2 months before, and I ended up going anyways. And the rest brought me to here because eventually it came back and I realized that creating that vacuum was one of the best things I could have done. And it enabled me to realize that I was no longer passionate about the technology, but I liked working with people a lot. And I liked this concept of coaching because that's what I learned to do while I was on the sabbatical.
So I think we have a video that talks about a day in the life of Todd that you put together a while back. Why don't we go ahead and roll that?
I'm going to tell you a story about me. As a coach, I often have to use stories to help inspire people to take action, to give them confidence on maybe a big decision they're thinking about, or to cause them to stop and reflect on the potential pitfalls of the road ahead. In today's story, I'm going to share with you a bit about what a coach does, why we coach people, what my typical day looks like. And I'm going to try to share some things that you might not know about coaching. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, where I now live and work. I work out of my house. I've also lived in Miami and Costa Rica. Locations and where you live or where you like to travel to often come up on calls since we deal with people all around the world. Nobody knows where Reading, Pennsylvania is. It was actually last famous about 100 years ago for our railroad, which you might have seen if you've ever played Monopoly. Here's my home office. Got lots of monitors. I need monitors. I need to be able to see what my client is presenting. I need to be able to see their faces. I need to be able to see my notes. I keep a document open on my local side so I can be 2 steps ahead of what they're editing on their presenting side. A typical day starts for me about 6 o'clock in the morning. I typically get up and I'll either read a little bit or then I'll come inside and I'll have breakfast with the kids. And if it's a really good day, I try to fit in like about 1.5 mile outside walk before my first call. Typically, my calls are going to start around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. My calls then go back to back until noon when I take lunch. We talk about this as coaches. You get into a rhythm of coaching where it actually becomes easy and fun, and you find you even have some of the same conversations all throughout the day with different clients. I probably am my best coach when I'm deeply listening to what a person is saying and focused on their schedule. So in order to get that kind of focus, I can't have a lot of distractions. And one of the ways I help manage my distractions is by really planning my day well. So I use this Excel spreadsheet to figure out what clients are going to be with me for every week of the month and what clients are only with me for some weeks of the month. Once I have this all together, I take this information and I book it into ConnectWise Manage. The Excel sheet is a planning tool, manages where I work throughout the day. I track my time. You can see on this sheet, the appointments that I had to work are on the left-hand side, and the time that I've tracked is on the right-hand side. In addition to being really helpful for billing our clients and tracking the profitability of our agreements, tracking time, it lets me keep track of what we're actually doing week to week. So if there's one thing that I really want everyone to take away, it would be that I have very little non-committed time on my calendar. When I'm on the call with a client, I try to close out my Teams, I close my email, I push my phone far away from me so it's not in reach, so I can give them my full attention. when I close my email, that's probably the biggest thing that lets me focus my effort. It's because when I ran my MSP, I had a bit of a problem with being a little too responsive to questions. So I've established a rule that basically says if someone's emailing me questions, I generally will push them to talk about those things during our scheduled meetings. So the reason why I share this as the one thing I want other people to take away about coaching is because I don't want you to think that you're not important to me if you're reaching out and I'm not getting right back to you. I'm highly focused on producing revenue through high quality coaching for our clients. And as such, I really have to limit those distractions. This is Neil. Neil has been my Thursday morning client for the past 2.5 years. He started with me, I think, just weeks into the pandemic. His business was a pretty typical MSP based in London, and he was having some problems. And when the pandemic happened, he decided he wanted to fix the problems inside the business. Neil was stuck because he wasn't scaling. He was putting out the fire of the day on a regular basis, and he and his partner were butting heads, and they weren't making a lot of EBITDA. Pretty much everyone in the company reported to Neil, and sales were kind of flat. Neil and I discovered we both really loved hiking. And as we chatted about this on our call, and I was telling him about a hike I was planning on the Appalachian Trail, he said, I'd like to come. And he agreed to fly over. And for our hike, we decided we would employ many of the same principles that we use in ops coaching. We set up a second weekly accountability call to discuss our progress of getting ready for the hike, because I didn't want to charge him for the time, so we did it outside of our main call. A coach can help hold you accountable to doing something. He said he was going to come, so that weekly accountability call helped us get ready for him to come over. Coaches can help you measure what matters. On our hike, we did 67 miles over 6 days. Sometimes on the trail, he was in front. Sometimes on the trail, I was in front. For this reason, I gave him the trail name, which is an Appalachian Trail thing to do, of pacemaker. He helped me be a faster hiker. Coaches help you set the pace. On the last day of the hike, we had to choose between an easy 2-mile hike out to the local trailhead or a 10-mile hike that we had to accomplish before noon in order to catch our shuttle. Even though we were tired, the next 10 miles were going to be some of the best views of the trail. So we decided to push on the hike, and guess what? We accomplished that 10 miles in record time. The first day of the hike, it took us 10 miles the whole day. The last day of the hike, we hiked about 10 miles in about 3.5 hours. Coaches help push you to do more than you thought you could. A couple of interesting things happened for Neil pretty recently. He's actually closing right now on the buyout of his partner. His business now has an outstanding dispatcher who's growing into a service manager's role. They have a good account manager, a strong finance lead, and a project manager who just closed a deal while Neil was out hiking with me for more money than Neil thought they could sell the deal for, all because they went through the project management track and the finance track and the ops coaching track and the VCIO and QBR track. I coach because I was coached, and that made all the difference for me in my life. And I love being able to give that back to our partners and help them achieve these things as well. So thanks for listening to me on what a coach does. I hope my story about Neil has helped share some perspective about what the relationship looks like that we have with our clients and how meaningful and impactful coaching can be on our partners' lives. Thanks.
I don't know if you guys can see the goosebumps, but that is what drives me to do what I do, right? Like that story you were telling about Neil, Todd, just underscores and outlines the importance of what we're doing. Those kind of outcomes, we hear about those every day when we're coaching. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my
That
pleasure.
was
I actually
awesome.
feel really fortunate to have some of those stories. I mean, I'm sure you had those stories when you invited me to join you here, but getting to be on the other end of those is an amazing full circle experience.
That's just
How do you
awesome.
build those relationships, Todd? How do you build that rapport with your clients?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that sometimes what's lacking in relationships or managerial relationships with people is the human element of it. So if you do the right things, if you invest the right amount of time, you're going to build those relationships so you can go beyond just a transactional conversation to the deeper humanistic parts of things.
So
It's time.
Todd, right before
It
we
just
Time and effort.
started the video, there's something I wanted to hit on. You said that you were the bottleneck, like you came to that conclusion. And I don't remember if one of us told you that or not. I'm kind of hoping maybe we did. But in our coaching core values, we have this thing that says we say what we think, professionally and tactfully, regardless of the impact on our revenue. As a matter of fact, whenever a new person starts an academy, I schedule a one-on-one with them just because I want to deliver how important it is that if we have something we need to say, even to an owner, that we think they don't want to hear or will upset them, but we think that they really need to hear it, that the coaches are fully empowered to say it professionally and tactfully. Even if the partner might fire us because they don't like that we're telling them that they're the bottleneck or the problem or whatever. Um, and I picked up on the fact that you said that, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how empowering that is as a coach.
Well, it's incredibly empowering as a coach, but I do have to answer the question. Ken told me that very directly in a call where I was frustrated with him, and I called him to task on something, and I'm thinking, wow, who's this guy and what's he doing? He's telling somebody something other than what I would expect. And he got on the call with me and very politely, tactfully told me that I was possibly the problem, and I needed to look at that. And he was right in this particular case. It stands out in my mind of like this situation that I had caused a problem in. So to be on the other side of that with clients, I've absolutely used that. I've told clients, and I tend to soften it a little bit at first. I say, you're probably not going to like what I have to say, or you might not like what I'm about to tell you, but you're here and you're spending a lot of money for me to be here. So let's talk about why I think this is an issue. And I'm very direct with what the issue is, and I'll make sure that when we leave, we tend to be still like I look at it like there's this relationship and then there's this relationship. And what we want to try to do is, even if we're at odds about where something's wrong, let's at least understand that we're both moving forward on that same path or same journey together. And it has resulted in clients saying they don't want to work with me any longer. In some cases, it was a coaching change, right? There was an opportunity for me to hand it off to another coach who had a different style that worked better with the client. In other cases, it was, the client came back later on. So I've seen both situations play out, and I'm happy to be in that spot.
Yeah, I
I
think
want
I
to,
think that that's super important. Go ahead,
yeah.
Chris.
Well, I just want to comment on. I love how the analogies you use about the hiking and coaching, and tie that with just the value of that ability to communicate and make that analogy and comparison. Because I think about, you said you had your first coach taught you what to expect from a coach, right? How would it be different if you had that video, if you had that analogy of a coach and the hike? How would that, something like that of understanding that coaching relationship and journey, impacted your ability to engage with someone to help you on that path?
Yeah, I think people are used to the concept of consultant, like let me do this for you. But coach is very often not well understood. And even culturally, it's not necessarily understood the same way outside the United States as it is in the United States. So what I think is interesting about that term coach is I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to be here for you, and we're going to be working together on the same thing collaboratively. And I'm going to be doing the parts that maybe are uncomfortable for you. I'm going to poke at this thing week after week and ask you the hard questions in such a way that forces individuals to learn, hopefully, or recognize their own challenges. And just in the same way, eventually, I recognize some of my challenges. I hope that I'm helping other people realize that they have challenges, because in every case that I work with companies, the problems start at the top, right? It's all about leadership. It's all about how we're managing people, and it's all about how we're helping empower others around us.
Todd, I'd like to ask real quick. I'm about 95% sure you're going to know where I'm going, but can you talk about the mute button?
The mute button. I control the mute button, right? I have muted people on a call before too. I remember a notorious call, 2-3 years ago now, and I got on a call, very large company, and they were intimidating for me at first to work with companies that were bigger than my MSP. I was very intimidated by that. So I got on this company thinking they're gonna be teaching me a lot, and 30 seconds into the second or third call, it was an argument, and I had to break out that mute button and mute all the participants and realign why we're here, what we're here to do, what the rules of engagement are for the call, and why coaching only works if we can really hear each other out.
Yep,
Wow.
and there's a thank you. I mean, knowing that you're empowered to do that, right? I think creates that environment where we actually solve real problems with our partners, right? And I've kind of wanted to highlight that a little bit. There's another reason that I use the mute button is I tell owners, even though they're the ones writing us the check, right? Our primary role isn't necessarily most of the time coaching the owner. It's coaching whoever it is where, the owner's trying to take hats off of them and put them on other people in their organization. And so we're trying to draw out the, whatever it is we're working on out of the other person in their organization. And what we found is while we want that guidance and leadership from the owners that are writing the checks to us, as soon as they start talking, that person that we're trying to draw out crawls right back in their shell. And it's so important to get the owners really basically to shut up and let us pull that person out of their shell. And
Well, I think that's
it's a
what you
hard
did
one.
with me, frankly. You helped coach me to my own call so you could separate my service manager and give him what he needed, because frankly he had to do some coaching to me as well. For me to be a leader, I had to hear it maybe from you, but I also had to have him in many ways step up and change his leadership style as well. And I think
Todd,
that was some good
did
coaching.
Rex mute you? Is that what happened? Did Rex mute you? Is that what happened? I want to know why this is significant here.
Yeah, I don't
He
know
is
if he
immutable.
muted me.
We'll move on.
I would
You can
like
go past that.
to transition here real quick to talk a little bit about, you had your business, you got it running pretty well, and you went through a life planning process, I think, and you kind of came out of that with some conclusions. I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of going through that journey.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I want to go back to where we ended the story a minute ago, which was kind of I was going on this sabbatical, and I went on this sabbatical. I had this amazing time with my family. My twins were 4 years old at that point, so I got to disconnect from the business for the first time in 20 years and experience life a little bit, and realizing that I didn't have to be the Herculean statue with all the weight on my shoulders. Let the rest of my team step up, and it also let some things fall apart, right? So there was some things that in the vacuum of me being there to catch all the issues, the team had to catch those issues, and some of them they took and they did a great job with, and other issues that they were struggling with kind of fell apart a little bit. And when I came back to the business with that clarity, I was able to say, here's what I need to focus my efforts on. But I also very clearly realized that I wasn't passionate about the technology. And I was sort of at the point where I knew I either wanted to rapidly grow my business to significantly larger than we were, or I was willing to let someone else grow it because I saw the security wave coming. And I didn't necessarily, because I wasn't passionate about the technology the same way, I didn't necessarily want to surf that wave. I wanted that to be somebody else who took it. So I looked at myself and I went through this Patterson life planning process, which was something that my HTG facilitator, Rich, put on. HTG Now Evolve was my facilitator offered this to me through one of our sessions. He says, you really should consider this because it's going to help you get clarity on what you want to do. And one of the things that I found is that I didn't in all points of my life, I didn't probably only have one coach. So he was someone else who was helping guide me. And the Patterson life planning process that it took me on came up with some stories around where I felt most fulfilled in life and what I wanted to do. And that clarity showed me through every hardship, there was a new plateau afterwards, and then a new mountain to climb. And I realized that the next challenge that I wanted to embark on was not climbing that security mountain. It was doing something different, doing something I was more passionate about. And I realized that I liked coaching my people and I wanted to coach more people. And I liked that process of helping. So I came back from my sabbatical and I worked for the next 2 years, really figuring out how to package and position my business for sale. And in June-ish of 2018, I started that process of starting to sell my business. And by the end of the year, 6 months later, we had gone through due diligence and require all the necessary steps to receive an offer on it. So by then, I was very clear on what I wanted to do with my life.
I love that, Todd. Before we respond to that, we have a question from the chat. So I want to make sure that I bring that aloud and let you know what it is. So the question is, what size or maturity does a company need to be in order to start coaching? Todd or Rex, you want to take that one?
I'm gonna let Todd go
Start
Or
with-
first.
Rex, let me take that one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not the size that you start at, it's that you start. You can be any size to start to benefit from a coach. And you may have different coaches throughout your journey, right? You may run a course with a coach and find that you're now ready to step into different advice. And you may have multiple coaches at the same size or at the same time, right? It could be both. I started coaching with my sales coach when I was about 4 people. I started coaching with Rex. I think when we started coaching Rex, we were probably about 10 people, right around that size. And I will tell you that one of the things that I attest to the success of our coaching is we didn't necessarily grow our headcount, but we substantially grew our gross margin through that process of coaching. And that changed the nature of our business.
It's interesting. There's a lot of people come up to me and trade shows and on the show floor, or I take a call and they say, I've been following you for a while, but I just didn't think we were ready. And I got a little bit more I got to do before we're ready to get going. Right. And like, it's sort of a bewildering comment to me. It's like, all I'm hearing is, well, that's more stuff we're going to have to undo. Right. After we start working with you, I don't know what the number is. We've worked with about 700 MSPs now or something like that in a coaching environment and approaching 13 years. And, I've talked about that ops guide before that I spent a year creating, in 2011. And I was pretty proud of it. And looking back on what that ops guide has become with 20-ish coaches contributing to it and 700 partners, going through the process and validating it and contributing to it. What I had at the end of 2011 is probably 10% of what it is now, right? So why somebody would say, well, I have to make it a little bit better. It's like cleaning the house before the cleaning person comes, right? It's like that just doesn't
Perfect
make any
is the
sense
enemy
to
of good.
me. Right.
Yes. Get started.
Yes.
Start now. Learn from it. It's easier
Do you
to
find a
fix mistakes
common
when they're
thread?
small. It's harder when they're big.
What I
Do
missed
you,
that last one, Todd.
It's easier to fix mistakes when they're small. It gets harder when they get bigger. So start
Oh
now.
yeah, they get big fast.
Todd, I'm wondering, did you take on over the years have taken on partners for coaching and started engagements and working with them? There's been a variance in kind of the perceived why they're doing things and kind of the a change in their uh, attitude or their embracing of coaching or the path that they think that they're on while they are starting to work with you?
No, I don't know that I see a change. Everybody usually comes into it because somebody else needs to fix something inside the organization. And little by little, like while we're talking through documents, Rex actually said this to me recently. While we're talking through documents and we're talking about operational efficiency, what we're really doing is helping people become leaders and becoming coaches themselves. We're teaching people how to coach others inside the organization. So why do they come to it could be a very wide variety of reasons. I have sales problems. I have operations problems. I've got procurement problems. The why is not necessarily the underlying root cause.
It's interesting. Somebody will say we've implemented your dispatch process, and my first thought is, well, it's not my dispatch process. It's after the 5 phases. It's your dispatch process. But okay, and they talk about a problem that's happening, and I say, well, which box in the process are they not doing that's causing this problem? And then they kind of expect me to bring the process up on my screen. And I'm like, no. You need to bring it up on your screen. You need to find it in your documentation and you need to bring it up on your screen and then we'll talk about it. And so we do that. And I remind them, hey, the reason we're not getting whatever is because there's not doing this box, right? The reason we put this box in the flow chart is so that that problem doesn't happen. And then, but I always end it with, and by the way I made you find your document and directed you to it and talked about, I aligned the problem to not following this box in the process. All I was doing was modeling for you, service manager or sales manager or finance manager. All I'm doing is modeling for you how you have this conversation with your employee, right? I want you to make them go find the document and find the box and talk about why. So I think that's really, really important. I think that's kind of the difference between a coach and a consultant, right? We're helping them fine tune the way they perform rather than the consultant who does it for you.
I'm curious, Todd, what is the process like for someone that is just getting started? Maybe they do have a specific problem they want to start with, or maybe they're not sure. What can they expect when they first get started? Is there an assessment? What does that whole process look like?
No, that's a good question. It's interesting because when you have something that works, don't change it. So when I
Yeah.
started as a client of C-Level, we had an Excel-based spreadsheet that Rex sent to me, and I filled it out. My service manager filled it out, and we sort of gave a subjective rating to how we thought we were doing in different areas. And we sent it back, and he gave us advice as to where to go and what to work on. And we talked through, and I'm going to say he coached us through what we should be considering. And I insisted I knew what I wanted to do. I hired you because I wanted to help you put a compensation program in place. So we started talking about the compensation program. And then later on, we went back to the spot that he originally suggested when I realized that the compensation program wasn't my main issue. So today we do this same process. We as coaches send out an assessment. And the assessment is something that the client fills out. Every person inside the company will fill out that assessment answering what their priorities are and where their pain is. And then we sit down with the client and their leadership team, and we'll talk through what's the real root cause of that to find the jumping off point.
I didn't
It's
realize you
interesting
send
you
it to
said,
everyone.
yeah, it's interesting you said I had you do the assessment. Like everybody wants to start this coaching engagement by saying you come in as the coach or consultant and do an assessment on us, and it's like there is no value in that whatsoever. I need to know where you think you are, and then we can start from there.
Well, I think that goes back to the core of coaching. It's not about telling someone. You can't tell someone what they need to know. You need to ask them enough questions to get them to understand what they need to know.
Yeah, we ask them how, rate me on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best on how well you document your clients' networks, right? And they're all going to say 4 or 5. Very rarely do they say I'm a 2, right? And sometimes they do, but they think they're a 4. But then when we get there, we say, okay, well, here's what a 4 looks like, and then they go, oh, I'm a 2, right? Like
Well,
that
and what I love to
that
see
kind of.
is when the owner of a company and the service manager both fill it out, and you've got a 5 and a 1, right? You can find by looking at that, you can say, oh, maybe we have a communication problem here, or maybe we have a documentation problem here. Let's dig into that a little bit.
Very telling, I imagine.
Oh man, you can't imagine the difference when the sales part of the house fills out the form versus the service part of the house fills out the form. They're 2 different ends.
Hey, Todd, I know you've had some great experiences. I think about your last video, and you've shared with us, and I know you've got some great experiences with the partners that you've coached and worked with. But you also have some really cool personal experiences. I'd love to kind of hear you share one in particular that I think it might have some pictures from.
Oh yeah. So we're telling the same story here. So let's go back to Costa Rica for a minute. Going to a different place was amazing. It was this life-changing experience. So when I talk about the story, what I like to tell people is I needed to go far enough away for my sake that I couldn't just get in the car and drive back home, or I couldn't just get in the plane and go back if I needed to. I needed to go to another country, and what I really wanted to do was kind of change my lifestyle a little bit, be much more connected to family and much less dependent on technology. So I did something that might sound completely foreign to people, but I didn't carry my cell phone around for a while because I didn't need it. And where I went to was a little town in Costa Rica, in the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica. This little town was called Samra, and we lived there as a family on the beach. It was amazing. We rented a house, and we sort of said, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be an amazing experience. So we sort of set up shop, got rid of our car. We had bicycles as transportation, where we literally, one kid would go in the basket, the other kid would go in the back of the seat. And that's how we got around town. And it was totally different from what I had done for the last 20 years. That's our backyard looking out at the ocean. It was an amazing, life-changing experience.
How long were you there for?
We were there for just about 65 days. I still remember that last day. My wife and I were about ready to close up the gate and leave. And we looked at each other and we're like, should we just stay? And we still talk about that moment of, should we have just stayed? And it was an amazing way to take what you've done, take this lifestyle of an MSP owner and say, okay, wait a second, something's missing from it. I need to figure out what that is and get intentional around the things that matter, life, family, things like that, and then focus on what's next.
I remember in some of those early coaching days, and we were talking about the EMyth, right? When you own a business, you only have to work half days, right? You even get to pick which 12 hours, and how the owners are super connected to all this. I'll bet there's some owners that are listening or watching the show, either live or on the recording, that are thinking there is no way I could leave my business for 65 days, right? Did you? Well, maybe you could talk just a little bit about like how we prepped for that and how long that really took, and some of the things you had to dig deep inside and think about, but also a little bit about did you cheat? Did you check in during those 65 days, and maybe how that progressed a little bit?
No, that's a good question. How did we prep? Well, it was 8 years of coaching with you and with Ken. And what we did is we worked through that ops guide that we did the assessment on through every section over that period of time to really make sure that I had processes that people could follow and that I had invested in the training of my people so they had clear definitions of their roles and they understood what they needed to do. And that plus me learning about my micromanagement problem and really working with my service manager, who was someone who stepped in to really fill the role when I wasn't there. He was the leader of the company, enabled me to step out. And yes, Mike, I'm expecting most owners might feel the need to cheat. I cheated. I did check in, but I did so on a schedule. And this is actually back to the coaching methodology. It was a weekly call with each person who was my direct report, and that was it. And so, I would do those weekly calls as needed, but I only had a certain amount of time that I was available to do that. So I had to limit the work to the time that I gave it. And then after that, I couldn't do the work. So that meant I had to trust my people to do what was needed or not, and they would learn from it. So there's a great picture that I don't have for you to show today, unfortunately, but it's of my daughter sitting on my lap, and she would come out in the morning when it was time to get up. So what this meant is I was on daddy duty, and I was going to play with my kids, and that meant that was the end of the workday. So that left less than an hour or so of time between the time zone difference for me to check in, do my 1 hour coaching call, and now it was time to go to the beach or go to my Spanish language class or do whatever was next. There was no more work for the day. And that's why I left my cell phone behind.
Did you maintain that cadence throughout the entire 65 days, or?
Oh, yeah, I know. See, I think you're remembering this because I got lazy towards the end and I stopped doing those calls every week because I was really living and I did not. And I think that that was probably something, if you're considering a sabbatical, I would encourage you to truly try to take the time as a sabbatical. If you're talking about how to manage people, I would tell you keep the cadence. So it's situational.
No, I'm most impressed by the fact that you had a lot of fear about letting go and letting your team run the company in the beginning, but you realized there wasn't disasters on each of those weekly calls, and then they became less important to you, I think is the way I interpreted that.
Yeah, and I think that, well, fast forward 2 years beyond that, when I did transition out of my MSP, there was not time because I had already accepted to come to C-level. So there was not a whole lot of time for me to do transition after the sale closed. And I was able to step out very rapidly, knowing with full confidence that my team already had the balls in motion. They were juggling, they had it all happening. And I was not needed to be in the day-to-day.
You made me nervous there for a second. I thought we were going to have to find a beat button. Anyway, oh man, I got to get back on track. So, so Costa Rica happens. You make this transition journey. Like, tell me about deciding to become a coach, right? Like, you were an MSP owner. Now you're an employee, and like, what was that journey like?
Well, I think the first thing that jumped out at me is I really like Visio, and I picked up on the fact that coaching involved a lot of Visio, and this is sort of an inside joke because all the coaches here at Academy know that I love to build Visio documents. But what Visios are to me is they're a picture, they're a map, they're sort of like a treasure map of something that you can convey visually to another person. So that journey of deciding to become a coach was all about learning what I like to do. I liked people more than technology. I liked engaging and talking and discussing strategy of how to change something, maybe more than I enjoyed actually getting down to deal with the change itself.
You're not expecting me to ask this question, so I might throw you off a little bit. But so you were an owner going through an acquisition transition, right? You know, where you were the one leading the change, trying not to say nothing's going to change, right? And then you joined C-level for I don't remember how long it was, a year or two probably. And then you got some news that C-level had been acquired by Pax8, right? And
Yeah.
I think that was probably a pretty big letdown. As a matter of fact, you were one of the toughest ones to bring along. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that 2 years later, all the coaches are still here, right? Which, from an acquisition perspective, is a pretty hard thing to do. But like, what did I? Because there's a lot of companies out there going through acquisitions, so you've kind of got some perspective as the seller and as the employee going along for the ride. Can you share some of those emotions you went through?
Oh, such an emotional roller coaster. And I don't think I really realized how difficult it probably was for my employees until I went through that experience. And so there was a lot of things that when I look back at my own transition out that I would have done differently, having had gone through the experience to from C-level to Pax8. And what I will say is, I came into the experience of Pax8 buying C-level, thinking big companies break what's special about small companies. And so I was very, very apprehensive. And I can tell you that one of the things that is a testament to what we've seen happen over the last 2 years now since C-level was acquired by Pax8 is it has not broken it. And in fact, if anything, I can see the C-level features and tendencies and ways of thinking permeating throughout the organization in very interesting ways that I like to say we're the tail that's wagging the dog, right? We're really making a measurable, meaningful impact in a very cool way.
By the way, those words measurable impact are straight from the vision statement that C-level was using. So I appreciate you resurrecting that a little bit. Yeah, no, it's super cool to see that happen. And do you think those kind of experiences help you in your coaching role, helping our partners as they're preparing for maybe some sort of an acquisition event?
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz in the channel about buying and selling other companies right now. That's definitely happening. There's deals happening out there. I would say that that's a topic that comes up with my clients at least monthly with opportunities. So it is something that we talk about in coaching quite a lot. And I do think that the experience of having been an owner who went through the sale process gave me perspective to be able to help other owners go through that journey of do I want to sell? is what's on the other end of a sale, and also, do I want to buy, and what does a good acquisition look like versus a money pit that you just don't know you've invested in yet. And I've worked really hard to try and talk owners through that journey to make the right decision for them. I don't have the answer, but it's the talking through it process that makes it a good experience. And I'd like to share, often I share some of the stories around our first all hands meeting that you invited me to in January after I became a full-time coach. So I've been kind of on board and training with C-level for about 6 months, because it takes a long ramp to get a coach up to speed. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of shadowing. So I had just gone live with about 12 clients.
I'm going to pause you there for just a second, because I want to bring some context to that. So when somebody comes on as a Pax8 Academy coach, we hire people because they're hotshots, right? They're operational hotshots. They've got the pedigree, and there's a sense that it's like, give me some revenue. I want to serve some revenue. I want to start helping some partners. And we say, hold on there, cowboy, cool your jets. We got some content we want you to learn, and we want you to go through shadowing a bunch of calls, and then they start diving into the breadth of the content, and they start listening and learning the methodologies that we use around coaching. And about 4 months, we say, so you think you're ready for some revenue? And they're like, nope. And we, about the 5 month mark, the role switches, like, come on, you got this. So just wanted to bring a little context of what he meant by that 6 month onboarding period.
And it takes time. It takes time to get the quality. So coming into this, I had a couple of clients that were going into our all hands meeting. You guys have done this all hands before. You were a small team, and I'm sitting and meeting a lot of these people who I've heard on the phone now, or heard on Zoom. Gosh, I'm dating myself with the phone. I heard on Zoom for the last 6 months, and I get to meet them for the first time face to face. And the moment you walk into the room, I actually rode an elevator down with one of the people, and we didn't say anything. And then I got off the elevator, and I heard him speak. I'm like, Jay? So you start to get to know these people, and very quickly, the point that's so important here about this whole sale or buy and journey of this process is culture, right? So in that room, at that first experience face to face, you really got to feel what the C-level culture was about supporting people, and that has continued through my Pax8 journey.
I love that. Oh, I've been dominating the conversation here, Chris or Bessie. Do you have?
Yeah, well, we're getting to the end of our time together, so I want to just give the floor to Todd. Todd, is there any final thoughts you have? Is there anything about coaching that we did not touch on that is very important that we don't want to miss? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, well, I mean, you've heard that we get a lot of time with the people that we coach, and that we work on operational things, and that the outcome of working on those operational things is that ultimately we're working to build leaders and managers. But there is also a personal element too. We really build these deep connections. I think that the part that I would stress is those deep connections that we build last a long time. I became close to Rex, and I said to myself when I was selling my firm, there's only one place I really wanted to go to work, because I wanted a lot of free coaching. So I figured if I came to C-level, I'd get some free coaching, and sure enough, I did. But you build these relationships that are so incredibly strong. I often talk to clients who were texting on something or talking on something, and you build these heartfelt connections where when something happens in their life, you feel it, and vice versa. And it's hard to describe how much more it is than just let's talk about a Visio document or an operational process. It's a life-changing experience.
I want to lean into that a lot.
Well, let me say something real quick, Chris.
Yeah, please.
Ultimately, the coaching relationship runs its course, right? Like, we get through our content, we get through our material, and the client makes an uncomfortable phone call to kind of let you know, hey, I think this has run its course. And they're like nervous to tell you that. And the first one as a coach maybe does sting a little bit, but then you realize, no, wait a minute, this is like a graduation. This is the throw the cap up in the air kind of moment. And there's the goosebumps, right? Because that's the moments that we live for, I think, in coaching. So go ahead, Chris.
And I would think that I love what you said, Todd. Just I want to lean into that a little bit because we can talk about the mechanics. We can talk about the benefits. We can talk about the results. But you just said it almost. It's so much more. And it's when you really experience it. This coaching, the relationship, the impact, the feelings around it's really, really powerful. And I think there's a lot of academy that resonates with that. Yeah, it's there. We can talk about it, we can explain it, we can show it, but to be it, to see it and feel it is can be pretty powerful and intense. So that's what I felt from what you said, and I just kind of wanted to lean into that and expand on that a little bit. So I think
it's not just numbers
on both sides.
And I've been thinking about this since the very top of the show, so I can't let it slide when you said, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. Quoted directly from Taylor Swift. If everyone on the call should probably just go and listen to Anti-Hero, it would make me so happy. So just a good reminder, sometimes you're the problem, and sometimes you need to be able to accept that someone else telling you that you're the problem too. Todd, I want you to give the last word, probably not Taylor Swift. So any last thoughts you want to share?
Well, last thought is you've spent some time today watching this assignment, this video, and I'm going to give you an assignment actually as an outcome, which is what are you going to do differently from today?
You're stealing it from Rex.
Oh, my thunder!
I love.
Well played.
I'm stealing it because I was coached.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Todd, for joining us today. Next week, we'll be talking to Jeremy Nelson. He'll be providing some guidance around sales. He's our sales coaching manager. MSPs sometimes, as Todd was mentioning today, are really nervous about sales, or that's the area that they want to work on. So it's an episode you do not want to miss. You can watch us live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain or on demand always. And Rex, you can close us out again.
So I did want to kind of say we've been talking a lot about coaching our partners or whatever, but all of these principles that we're talking about, coaches versus consulting, they all apply to the way you work with your team as well. And so kind of let that sink in a little bit. We're hoping you picked up at least one nugget today. So do ask yourself, what are you going to do differently tomorrow? Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Subscribe.